Journey back in time with us to a time when giants walked the earth, a time of the Big Red Machine, the Iron Curtain, and the Orange Crush, a time of Mr. October, Smokin' Joe, and Mean Joe, a time of greatest sports legends, and Bob Uecker. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike. I'm here with Rick, as always.
Hey, everybody.
And today we've got something that Rick cooked up, and maybe he can tell us a little bit about his thinking on it, why he's making us do something about sports again.
I certainly hope I can. We're going to talk about a show called Greatest Sports Legends, and it was a syndicated half-hour show profiling different icons of the sports world, but I think it's representative not just of sports itself, but of kind of like the weekend syndicated programming that was on like in the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. And it's something that nowadays I think you get maybe like the EI, the educational programming you see, and some maybe nature shows. And there were nature shows back then, but to me this suggests a little something different. It was on for a long time. It was on really like 20-some years, I think 1972 to 1993, in first-run syndication.
Wow.
So they didn't do a whole lot of episodes. I think they did maybe 10 a year, and various hosts rotated through the years, and we'll see a couple of them in the episodes that we chose here. But the same basic format, kind of like a casual interview with an athlete. And although they did mix in some like more documentary episodes with some like somebody like Babe Ruth who wasn't around during the 1970s or 80s.
And I assume they got deep into his Harold Lloyd fixation.
Well, yes, but this just says something to me about like the style of kind of TV at the time, and again, it's the kind of thing that maybe nowadays with all the different choices we have, you'll have sports profile shows on sort of regional sports channels. Like there's a few things being done like this, one-on-one interview shows, but I think this is kind of unique. It's they tape them at a resort most of the time, a particular resort. Mm-hmm. It's very casual, but sort of like, to me, this is like 1970s, 1980s weekend casual, but it's like seemed like aimed at like a dad who's, wants to get away from the family for a little bit, but he's maybe in the den on his TV. Mm-hmm. You come in, you're used to getting sports on the weekend, but it can't be sports all day because this was before, like mostly before ESPN and before there were sports all the time.
Yeah.
And everything was on TV.
Or if there wasn't sports, there was people talking about sports.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd have things like this would fill in the blanks, or maybe if you had like a college football game that would start at 1:30 or something like that. The station could put this on at 1, mm-hmm. or maybe like after a game or something like this, they would plug this in and kind of maybe use it as a utility show, mostly on the weekends. To maybe you could build a schedule around it, but I think it would be like a complement to other like weekend programming, or even something like Wild Kingdom or something like that. Again, totally aimed at like a male audience, like kind of a middle class kind of male thing, like guy that well, I'd like to be out playing golf today, but since I'm not out playing golf, I'll just sit in the den and get a highball and sit down and watch Tom Seaver interview Willie Mays or something like that. And as such, I think it's kind of interesting. It speaks a little bit to how TV has changed, because this show seems a little bit of like a relic nowadays.
It does, yeah. When you told me about it, I didn't have a memory of it, but watching it felt vaguely familiar. But maybe just that kind of show again.
Yeah. But
it did feel exactly like you're saying, like Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Just something maybe that came on at random times,
right.
Or something.
Yeah.
Or like you were saying before a game, but maybe it would be like to fill out the, like if a game ended early.
Yeah.
We'll stick this in here until the news comes on.
Yeah, if something went into like a rain delay, you could put this on.
Yeah.
Definitely that's how I remember it, kind of like more of a utility player than like a main event kind of show.
Yeah.
But they seem to have made money off it for years, and there's a selection of episodes on Amazon Prime. Mm. And unfortunately, I think they've had the same, maybe like 20 episodes for 5 years or whatever on there. And I'd love for them to add more.
Yeah.
But there's other episodes that are widely available if you if you look for them. But according to what I found, they made it 207 total episodes.
Oh.
All of them like a half hour, like I said, pretty much the same format, although one that we're going to talk about broke format a little bit. But and another thing I would say as a general thing is, to me, I think they changed the theme song over the years, and I think one of these had a different opening than the other. But for a while, they had like a real, especially in the 70s, they had a real like jazzy, dynamic, like theme song with like 70s kind of like action music, or like kind of like something I'd associate with like, okay, here's Formula One highlights in the 70s or something. Here's the back music we're going to play like in the background of like auto racing or something.
Yeah.
But the show itself is very conservative, it seems to me, like, and just like not in a political way, but just in a very conservative way. It's like you have some like a laid back chat with the athlete, usually conducted by another athlete or somebody that's going to make them comfortable. They go through their career in an easygoing way, you know, really no hint of controversy. And there's a couple of examples we'll see here, I think, today where they could have gotten into things that they really didn't. And, you know, just have a nice chat, and then they'll mix in like old footage from the athletic events with maybe contemporary voiceover narration.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just get like a pretty good sense. They hit the highlights of the athlete's career, but without any real depth, even though there's sort of that illusion of maybe getting to really know them one-on-one by having them, you know, kind of in an intimate setting or in a more casual setting. But I don't really know if you really get to know them more well. But at the same time, we also have to remember that this is before you had access to these people. So it was kind of a bigger deal to see athletes interviewing other athletes, or just seeing the athletes in general in this format, because, again, like sports TV, especially in the 70s and even into the 80s, when our episodes that we're going to talk about there wasn't this kind of saturation of athletes being interviewed all the time and making appearances on radio shows and talk shows. I mean, some of the bigger ones were, but this was still a relatively unique thing, I think, back then.
Okay. And it does seem like you said, you know, geared towards like dads. There is an air of like, oh, they're just regular guys.
Yeah.
Just hanging out. Two regular guys hanging out who happen to have had these athletic careers.
Yeah. It's kind of like celebrities are just like us too.
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's greatest sports legends, like the documentary, like the footage kind of shows their exploits and makes them kind of seem pretty big, larger than life. But yeah, it seems like there's definitely a deliberate effort to make them seem accessible and approachable during the interview segments. So we focused on two specific episodes, both available on Amazon Prime Video as we do the show here. And one with Terry Bradshaw, that was from 1987, and the other from 1985 with Bob Uecker. And the Uecker episode, I think, that's not the usual format. That's exceptional, but it's one of the best episodes I've ever seen of that, because it does break format.
Yeah, I think we should take that one second.
Okay. Yeah.
So we can establish what the show is.
Yes. So the Terry Bradshaw one is more conventional, although it did have like a guest host. So instead of having one of the usual rotating hosts, and they changed them like very often over the years. I think George Plimpton, I didn't mention him, he was a host at one time too.
I did see him listed, yeah.
Yes, who would obviously have a much different style than like Reggie Jackson interviewing. But this one, it was Willie Stargell. So you had baseball, Pittsburgh Pirate Hall of Famer interviewing a Pittsburgh Steeler Hall of Famer.
In California.
Yes, in California. Pretty much years after, and I didn't realize that this episode was aired as late as it was.
Yeah.
It's kind of timeless. Like the way they do it and the way it looks, like I think, and all of them seem like they were done in about the same like 3-year period in the late 70s, early 80s. But this is a little bit after the peak. But you know, Pittsburgh was kind of the city of champions, the late 70s, and America's team, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, in your opinion.
Well, there's some other claimants to the title, but Dallas Cowboys are more of like, if you're into the showbiz and things like that. But the Steelers won 4 Super Bowls in the 1970s.
They did, yeah.
And they were big television stars, and they were kind of like big rivals for the Dallas Cowboys, and they're superior in pretty much every way. And by the way, for the purposes of this podcast, we will not be considering any subsequent teams that have won more Super Bowls or tied any or surpassed any achievements by the Steelers in the NFL. Thank you.
Other teams have, because I believe Terry Bradshaw said he didn't think that would ever happen.
Terry Bradshaw won 4 Super Bowls. Can you imagine like one quarterback to win 4 Super Bowls? Say what you will about Terry Bradshaw, but that pretty much makes him the best ever, because, yeah, you're right. That's a feat that could never be surpassed.
That's what he said.
Yeah, well, he was right. He was very, forward-thinking.
So a team might have surpassed that, but...
Well, even a team wouldn't surpass that. I mean, 4 Super Bowls? I mean, geez. I can imagine maybe tie 4 Super Bowls, but just the pressure of going for that 5th one and trying to top the Steelers would probably be too much to overcome, and I don't think any team, let alone one individual, guiding anyone to more than 4 Super Bowls or even 4. That's kind of ridiculous. I mean, this is, it's not greatest fantasy legends. It's greatest sports legends. We're talking about stuff that really happened and could happen.
And 4 in the span of what, 10 years?
Yeah, in a decade it was about 8 years, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Even more, or 6 years maybe. No, I think
so he played like 13 years, and
yeah, and many of them were good years. Not all of them were, but
sure.
But it's kind of an interesting episode. It's after the peak of Pittsburgh, but they aren't necessarily like the real superstars. Like they've had episodes with pretty much all the big names you could think of in sports. I think were on the show. Mm-hmm. You know, like Pete Rose or and some of like the New York athletes.
Babe Ruth.
This is Babe Ruth, yes, and. But it was interesting to see like two people that weren't like huge, but were definitely in their sports. They were very big, but not necessarily as big mainstream like at the time this was taped. Although in the late '70s, the Pirates were famous, and the Pittsburgh Steelers would be known by pretty much everybody because they were just like on top at the time.
Yeah, in the Sears catalog, when they had the helmets and the jerseys, you could get Steelers and Cowboys were always the ones promoted the most.
Right. Well,
and I think the year we got them, I think I wanted Steelers won it.
Really?
Got a Vikings. I don't know why I wanted a Steelers one. I think it was just that promotion.
Yeah.
And I remember liking Terry Bradshaw, but I don't know why.
Yeah.
It was just because they were around.
Yeah. I mean, they were probably on TV a lot and just ubiquitous. And Terry Bradshaw made the rounds and was a pretty well-traveled guest. I think was on talk shows and things.
Maybe I thought their helmet looked cool.
Yeah, well, that could be too.
I don't know.
Everybody loves winners.
Yeah. And
the Steelers and Cowboys were definitely that.
And I specifically didn't like the Cowboys. I think that was a family thing, not to like the Cowboys.
Yeah, but you didn't get an Atlanta Falcons.
No, I think my brother wanted to, we got what they had.
Yeah.
So I got like a Vikings helmet and a jersey, I think, with Fran Tarkenton's number, and he got a Broncos helmet and jersey.
Well, it's got a nice little journey around the league.
Yeah.
A little variety. Could jazz up the backyard football games, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you think about the show? I mean, like, as somebody that wasn't necessarily as into it as I was.
I enjoyed it. I was surprised, I guess, just based on the Terry Bradshaw of today, that how sort of like modest and laid back he was.
Yeah.
Because, now he's sort of this character.
Right.
And I haven't seen him in a while, but I know, he would go on talk shows. And when he's on those, the Sunday morning preview shows, I guess everybody has to be a character on those, it seems like. But it also seems like he was one of the first people to kind of do that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I don't know if that's unnatural for him.
Yeah.
Maybe being modest is unnatural, or maybe he grew into being more big. Because, he did talk about coming from a modest background and, not going to a big college and not living in a big town and kind of being overwhelmed when he got to Pittsburgh, to the pros.
Yeah.
Not having the knowledge. He had the talent he needed, but he didn't have the knowledge he needed.
Yeah.
So I liked that. I liked the footage. And that was that the NFL Films narrator?
I think Harry Callis, who was it at one time. He wasn't the classic one.
Oh, okay.
I think it was like redubbing of like some old footage.
Okay.
I think he did it for the show, like Greatest Sports Legends, I think, for a while. So he would take old footage and just like act like he was doing it.
Okay.
Contemporaneously, I think.
But it had a similar sound to that.
Oh, yeah,
and
definitely.
The footage was that kind of slightly slow motion footage.
Yeah.
And it was great footage. I mean, because it was mostly just running and passes.
Yeah.
But you could see, like, not just Bradshaw, but like Lynn Swann and everyone back then, they would talk about, he takes ballet. And he said, but you could see how graceful he was in some of those receptions he was making. So that was cool, but it's that kind of thing I sometimes get frustrated with, because I like interviews. Mm-hmm. And like, especially they seem to be leaning on the film more than the interview.
Yeah.
So I get frustrated that there wasn't enough interview, as good as the film was.
Yeah.
And because it's really only 23 minutes or something.
Right.
It's not a lot of time.
True.
I mean, that happens more. Like, I see these things sometimes, a profile of a musician or something on one of the morning shows. Mm-hmm. And it's 7 minutes, and maybe 2 minutes of it is interview, and the rest is the reporter narrating their story. And
yeah.
I'm like, I just want to hear them talk. I don't need the whole history of them.
Right.
Or even in magazines, I would generally rather read a Q&A than a profile.
Yeah.
Because that's more interesting to me. But at the same time, this footage is great, so
yeah.
I guess maybe I wish it had been an hour, and they could have balanced that more.
That makes a lot of sense to me. You do get these you don't have time to get into a lot of depth and really even the highlights only cover the surface of him. But I think probably like the highlights were like a huge draw back then because, again, not SportsCenter was still relatively, was not as prominent as it is now, and highlights everywhere, and you didn't see a lot of this footage as much.
Yeah.
Or it was kind of a bigger deal, I think, maybe to kind of relive it and see it because you couldn't necessarily pull it up on demand.
Right. And they, like one of them was the Immaculate Reception, right? Mm-hmm. The Franco Harris catching him. I already forgot exactly what happened, but it was pretty immaculate.
Yeah.
And or stunning. And yeah, if you're not seeing that all the time, it's probably cool to see it.
And I think that's a good example of kind of what the show's about, because like now, if you would talk about that, you could not talk about that play without like the controversy, but this one pretty much just totally ignored it because
so what is
technically it's illegal. It could be if the ball, because you see like two guys colliding, like a Steeler and a Cowboy, and then Franco gets the rebound basically.
Yeah.
If the Steeler touched the ball, then that's by the rules of the NFL at that time. Then no other player can. It would be an illegal catch for Franco if a player on his own team touched the ball. And Frenchie Fuqua, the running back who was involved in that, he's been notoriously coy over the years about whether he actually touched it. Yeah. I think a lot of people would think, the film, you can't really tell from the film, and the Raiders swear that he did. And John Madden, who was coach at the time, insisted for years that they got screwed out of that it never should have counted. And, who knows what happened, but the point is what counts in the scorebooks. But it's one of the most famous plays in NFL history, partly because there's that controversy there. But they didn't mention that, in the play. They just talk about it as like, oh, here's a cool play, but they don't really get into the details behind it.
Right, and they didn't talk about that in the interview at all.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, they don't, and even like Terry Bradshaw sort of addresses, like he had like some major issues with Chuck Noll. He was benched, his head coach at the time, and they didn't always get along. But he might allude to that, and he's had an up and down relationship with the Steelers and I think the city of Pittsburgh in some ways over the years. And maybe when this was taped, maybe one reason he was humble was because things didn't end so great, like necessarily on his own terms. He was injured and didn't finish up really strong as he would like in Pittsburgh, and maybe that had something to do with it. But they don't really get into like, oh, what was going on with you and Chuck Noll, and were there problems? It's really just kind of a glossed over look at sports. It's more like, okay, these guys are iconic stars, and we're just it's much more reverent than you would do today, I think.
Yeah, he says he kind of wanted to leave.
Yeah.
The season he was benched, but then eventually he got put back in the rotation.
Right. It's kind of framed more as like, oh, that was a real setback that he overcame and became the starter again. And it's kind of weird now to think like a Hall of Fame quarterback getting benched. But he had some rough times, and his career stats aren't that great, mind you. They're really not. I think he barely had more touchdowns than interceptions, but he won 4 Super Bowls. So
right.
And he played on this great team.
Yeah, that was something they didn't really talk about the whole team.
No.
They talked about him and the receivers.
Yeah.
They mentioned Franco Harris, but they didn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
And then they didn't talk about like Mean Joe Green and all those.
Right.
And those were defensive guys.
Yeah. Mean Joe Green was maybe the most famous guy on the team because of that Coke commercial.
Right. Yeah.
And he's maybe the one you would think of other than maybe Bradshaw because he was the quarterback. But it was interesting. Like again, maybe kind of the format. It's so short, you don't really have a chance to get into a lot of those things. Yeah. But
and
it
I
still
guess
seems something's missing.
It's about him.
Yeah.
So the defense, it doesn't really have anything to do with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bradshaw stood on the sidelines while the defense did their job again.
Right. Yeah, and I think too, like his kind of humility that you mentioned. It seems like now you almost expect your sports personalities, or many people think that they're expected to be characters. Mm-hmm. And I think back in the '80s that was more the exception. There's always been colorful people in sports, but
right.
I think more the default was more, okay, give credit to people around you, like your wide receivers, and be courteous to, this guy, Willie Stargell, a great that's interviewing you. And it seems genuine to me. I do think over the years he learned to put on more shtick and kind of emphasize that. And he had a reputation for being kind of a dumb guy, but I don't really think he was.
Particularly dumb.
No.
Like he says, he didn't, when he got there, he didn't know how to read a defense and do these things. A lot of quarterbacks should know if you're in the pros, I would think. And that they would sort of just make up plays until he learned it.
Right.
But he doesn't seem dumb to me.
No.
He's a yokel. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, he's he's kind of a good old boy, but
yeah.
In the least negative sense of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think he's dumb. Like Willie Stargell, I would say, didn't seem totally comfortable
No.
In terms of being in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And, I assume someone wrote the questions for him.
Yeah.
Even though he did, set himself up at least once by saying, I've got a really interesting question for you.
Yeah. Yeah, or he'd say something like, there's one thing I want to add, and it's like, yeah, right, It didn't seem natural at all.
No.
I think some of the shows, like when Reggie Jackson was hosting, he seemed to really embrace it. And guys like Tom Seaver, this was a guest appearance, but Willie Stargell seemed more forced into the format. I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind this, except maybe, just get these two former Pittsburgh guys in.
Right.
But,
I assume his reasoning was a free trip to California.
Yeah, for his reasoning, yeah.
Also, the exteriors of La Costa Spa and Resort in Carlsbad, California.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Carlsbad, California.
Looked really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Where they did the interview, it just looked like any hotel room.
Like a generic...
Not even a good...
Yeah, not even like a conference center or even a hospitality suite or something.
I
Just
know.
like
It's like a weird table that might have been like marble, but might have also been some sort of composite or plastic or something.
Right.
They had nothing on it. They didn't even have beverages they were pretending to drink. It was just like they were.
It's very antiseptic.
They were sitting in Terry's room.
Yes.
Like the Uecker one we'll talk about later. He's outside and you can see the golf course and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of them seem to take advantage of the settings more, and like they'll be doing outdoor activities or something.
Oh, yeah.
Like, or they'll go somewhere, they'll drive somewhere, and or be driving around in a golf cart while they're talking to each other. But the interview thing was a little bit awkward.
Which may be why they had so much footage.
Yeah. Oh, that could be. Maybe they didn't get a lot to use out.
Yeah.
That's a good point. But I do think overall it's kind of sad now, and I'm obviously a big fan of those 70s Pittsburgh sport fans, and Willie Stargell was beloved at the time of 1987. He certainly wasn't back in the 70s. He was one of the most popular players in the franchise and kind of the leader of the disco era We Are Family team. But, there was kind of a dark side to that, and later, stuff came out about, like, the drug trials in Pittsburgh involving the Pirates and Major League Baseball and the cocaine scandals, and it's kind of put a little bit of a cloud over that. And with the Steelers, there was, like, talk now of, like, steroid use in the 70s. Probably many teams were involved in it, but there's allegations that the Steelers were involved in that. And then we have concussions, and Bradshaw suffering concussions, and they showed, I think, some of the hits that got him injured, and he gets hit, like, right in the face, in the head, basically. He gets knocked out of that.
It was a Super Bowl, right? He got...
yes, in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that hit was...
Yeah, he didn't finish... That's right, he didn't finish that game because he got crushed, I guess.
By a guy who was, like, at least half a foot taller than him.
Yeah, like, just flying at him and hitting him, targeting him, like, right in the head, which is totally illegal now, but, man, these aren't things that are really discussed, and maybe not appropriate for Dad sitting in his den on a weekend afternoon and relaxing.
He was talking about how much the Steelers hated to lose and how mad they'd get, and that they'd all be in the locker room, like, throwing furniture around and yelling and stuff. And I thought that was cool that he was being candid about that. And and then we drink a lot of beers. And it's like,
yeah.
They probably wouldn't even say that now.
Yeah.
Just for fear of being judged.
Yeah, we go and play video games.
Yeah.
And we check our social media.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely a different era, and I think you can see this even with kind of its awkwardness. It definitely kind of harkens back to that time, and just sports had a different place in the culture. And you could argue better or good, but people revered the athletes a little bit more, and the relationship was a little different. And you had like very deferential programs like Greatest Sports Legends that kind of helped serve and create the myth. Greatest Sports Legends, the title alone, kind of says something, doesn't it? So
it does. When he said they drank beers too, I imagine them drinking like cans of beer.
Yeah.
Like crushing them and throwing them.
Iron City.
Yeah.
Iron City beer and crumbling it up and
so mad.
Yeah, smashing on their heads like the linemen smashing on their heads and crumpling up and pitching it over their shoulders. Has to be.
Also in the footage, this has nothing to do with him, but they showed at some point, I think Chuck Noll handing the Super Bowl trophy to, I assume, who's the owner, and that guy didn't look excited at all. He was just sort of like holding it and looking at it like, what is this thing?
Yeah, well, when you
he
win...
did look old.
When you win multiple Super Bowls, maybe it does get old after a while.
He's like, I'm just going to have to polish this.
Yeah.
Look at all the smudges on it already.
Yeah.
These sweaty players.
That's right. Why do I have to carry this thing?
Yeah. But, it's enjoyable, and I would enjoy seeing a version of that about something else. Like that subject about, with actors or...
Yeah. Greatest Hollywood Legends or something.
Yeah. They're musicians.
Yeah.
Anyone had something interesting to say, I guess. But like a theme like that.
Right.
The structure.
Byron Allen, are you listening to the podcast today? I think we've got another show idea for you.
How about greatest Byron Allens?
Yeah.
Every week a different celebrity interviews Byron Allen.
Yeah, it's their take on Byron Allen and his career. They could focus on a different aspect that's relevant to them, what Byron Allen means to them.
Right. So Byron Allen's greatest entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
that'd be a good one for him.
It's another winner.
Yeah.
Write it down and mark it, folks.
Right.
You heard it here first.
He could revive greatest sports legends.
Really
I know he is the athletes with Byron Allen.
Yeah.
Or he used to, but, it's a little different format.
And
there's only one athlete a week.
Right.
Not like 8.
Yes. And I recall there were some imitators around the time. There's a show called Greats of the Game that Tim McCarver hosted. And there was a piece of music that I've been trying to identify for years. So if anybody has any Greats of the Game episodes, let me know. It's actually very hard to... Tim McCarver was the longtime broadcaster and former catcher. And it was a profile with just baseball stars. And I think it was kind of the same format. But it's very hard to find any information about it on the internet. I haven't been able to find any footage or anything. So I'd love to find some more of that. But that was, I think, around the 80s, probably when Tim McCarver was... I don't think it was very long lasted at all, but it was another like syndicated kind of deal. And there were similar like athletic profile shows. But I think Greatest Sports Legends was pretty well known in its day. And probably the heyday might have been more like the 70s than the 80s. But some of the reruns have showed up on ESPN Classic and things like that. So
before we move on to the Uecker, this one had some cool music in it.
Yeah.
Like during the football footage.
Yeah.
Like really dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they actually took like NFL Films produced clips because they didn't use like the original. I don't know actually.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing if they gave them credit or not, but
I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why the sports leagues wouldn't work with this show because the show is making everything look great and it's good promotional, like kind of limited use of the footage and everything. But yeah, the music was really cool. I mean, the football highlights look like you say they look fantastic.
And I thought, the theme song on this was good too.
Yeah,
it was a very synthy.
Yeah.
Synthesizer kind of thing, and they didn't go over the top, but they definitely used some of the video suite effects.
Yeah. that's a good call. Yep.
Yeah. So there's nothing quite like seeing like a neon square around black and white footage of Babe Ruth hitting a home run.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also on Amazon, I these were like cropped or stretched for widescreen. It didn't really affect it, but it looked weird.
Yeah, that's become an unfortunate trend on streaming services and TV channels, and it really needs to go. Having said that, though, I would watch more if they put them up. I really enjoyed the thing and wish they would add to it. I mean, if you got 207 episodes, I think you could throw a few more up there, get a little more variety in the lineup.
Yeah, some of the other ones looked interesting.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Bob Uecker.
Yeah.
The true legend.
Yeah. Talk about great and legends, and I guess sport too. But yeah, Bob Uecker, mediocre backup catcher in Major League Baseball for years, and was the subject of his own episode here.
Yeah.
With kind of a different style. I mean, I've seen a lot of these. I saw them over the time. I've watched more of them over the years, and I don't remember them doing like a straight up like kind of parody like this is essentially right. It's really like a pure comedy piece.
It is, but I got to give them a lot of credit. They know their tone.
Yeah.
And I would say 90% of it is just it's like a mockumentary.
Yes. Yeah, it really is.
I think a couple of the real athletes I talked to maybe walk the line between sticking to the deadpan joke and not, but
not even bothering to.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Right. Yeah. Hank Aaron.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And of course, at the center of it is Uecker, who is known for being a funny guy.
Yes, Mr. Baseball. Bob Uecker made literally scores of appearances on The Tonight Show, dating back to the 1970s, 70s, and 80s. He was a very popular guest, and it's easy to see why. Like, and when this came out, this was maybe like Uecker's prime as a celebrity because he was also in the Miller Lite beer commercial campaign.
Right. He was in tons of those.
He really was.
It seems like it might have only been 3, but
No, he was in a bunch of them.
Center of it, yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of them in the YouTube,
Awesome.
our YouTube playlist for this. I think we could probably do like a whole playlist of just Bob Uecker ads, and I think people would be entertained.
Yeah.
I think he made such an impact with some of those ads, and it became like when they'd have like multiple people, you'd almost be disappointing if Uecker wasn't in one of those ads,
right,
because you kind of expected to see him turn up. But and of course he was also a star on Mr. Belvedere.
Yes.
In the 80s.
Yeah. Maybe the star.
Yes. Even more than Bryce Beckham. It's debatable, but I think you got to have that discussion at least. So
where is that reboot?
Mr. Belvedere?
Yeah. Euchre's still around, right?
Yeah, he is.
I know Mr. Belvedere isn't, but
no, he's not.
There's an idea there. Maybe Uecker is, the parents are old and needs taken care of, and so Wesley moves back in with them.
Yeah.
But he can't handle it all, so they get a butler.
Okay, yeah, and there's some like grandkids or something causing problems for Wesley.
Yeah. Sure. I guess if you have to have kids.
Yeah. Well,
more thinking the parents they're the troublemakers.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, it could be. It's
maybe Mr. Belvedere is Ms. Belvedere.
Ooh.
And there's some sexual tension between Ms. Belvedere and Wesley.
Whoa! I hadn't expected that, but
and he's very confused.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, it could be like Mr. Belvedere's niece or something like that.
Yeah,
like relative that came over to help the. I can't remember the name of the family on that, but
I don't remember.
Folks, if you want to see us, if you want to hear Mr. Belvedere episode, let us know.
Well, find us a way to watch Mr. Belvedere.
Yeah, it may take a while.
Yeah, but Euchre's and
he was a mainstream star though.
Yes.
The thing. Despite not being, he built a career as a celebrity on the basis of being a bad baseball player, and he played that up. He wrote like a couple of books, like an autobiography that was very funny, and he was very popular on the speaking circuit and made all these Tonight Show appearances. So probably everybody knew who he was.
So was it the books led to everything else, or
I don't know what the time. No, the books came out later. Like the books came out after he was a celebrity. I think like he was already on the Tonight Show before he even wrote it.
How did he? Yeah, how did he go from being the mediocre baseball player to becoming the celebrity?
I think really it was the Tonight Show that did it for him, and I can't remember exactly how he got that gig on the Tonight Show. I think he did also when he was in baseball, he did like local fill-in work and like I think some radio work for like team things and somehow got visibility that way.
Okay.
And sort of developed some broadcasting skills and getting used to being on camera and
yeah.
And then it just went from there. But
he's worked as an announcer too.
Yeah, right now he's the Milwaukee Brewers announcer, and pretty much for the last since like the early '70s, he's been with the Brewers, and he's become a legend in that. And he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Technically, he won the Ford Frick Award, which is given like to an outstanding broadcaster. So he was recognized that way and gave like an awesome speech.
Yeah,
of course, and we can mention too he's the stuff of legend in recent years because of people who have looked up to him like Norm Macdonald. Like going on talk shows and like Letterman and telling stories about how funny Bob Uecker is and things like that. So I think he's become kind of a legend. Like, and some things I've heard on like some podcasts, like everybody, tell us your Bob Uecker stories and stuff. Like, well, I don't know if I can tell them because he keeps it clean on the air, but apparently he's a little looser mouthed off camera. And he was in Major League, of course, not TV related, but memorable as the announcer in there and pretty much stole that movie.
So the format of the episode, I mean, they have game footage, which I assume is legit game footage, stills of newspapers, which are definitely made up, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And he's being interviewed by Jane Kennedy, actress / personality.
She was a model, right? A pageant contestant, I think, and a personality, and did this and had been on NFL Today in the 70s, replacing Phyllis George. And kind of that female slot that they had there. Yeah. And so she was well known to sports fans at the time, and I guess did some hosting on Greatest Sports Legends for a while.
He just answers all these questions with great gravitas.
Yeah.
Even though he's saying stupid things half the time.
Right.
And I mean, I already said it, but that it could have been a dicey proposition.
Yeah.
If you weren't good at that.
Yeah.
Whenever you see people trying to improv and they're not good at improving.
Right.
That's just, and they probably did a good job editing it. And I mean, it did have a writing credit, although that was probably more the narration and things. Yeah. But I'm sure if she laughed at his response, at what he said, that they were just cutting that out.
Right.
So she was able to seem serious too.
Yeah. I mean, they were doing like definitely like treating it as serious, and this is like, and he's telling some jokes and using some material that he'd used before, but like in a different way. And actually, you see different Ueckers, I think, and this is like a Uecker that you don't usually see. You see like the totally self-referential or self-deferential Bob Uecker, self-deprecating, just totally making fun of himself and making no bones about it. And then you see kind of like the clueless guy from the Miller Lite commercials who thinks he's a big shot, but he's like a stooge.
Yeah.
This one is more like there's more of an arrogance to it, and it's more like really like full of himself kind of, and everything, right. and just like you said, saying ridiculous things, but really like treating it like he really is like a legend and everything.
Yeah.
Which is kind of contrary to what his usual thing was. We're just kind of making jokes, cracking jokes about himself, maybe doing it deadpan, but not with any hint of seriousness that he really believes that he was good or anything like that. Whereas this is kind of like the opposite.
Yeah. Like she says, and you hit 150 that year. It's like, I was on fire.
Yeah. Right. His great accomplishment of helping the team by getting a shot of getting some hepatitis so they wouldn't wreck their chances of winning the pennant at the end of the regular season.
And being a beautiful shade of yellow.
Yeah. He just kind of like pauses and he's just like so like methodical when he's saying this stuff, and like the looks in his face, it's classic the way he delivers it.
Yeah. And one of the first things is like he says that the Milwaukee Braves murdered the scout that that signed him, but then it goes on because he was never going to find anyone as good as him.
Yeah, they had him executed because they didn't want to have to live up to that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was like sort of like jokes that he'd probably made before, but like with new twists for this episode. Yeah. And maybe he prepared some of this stuff, but it doesn't matter. Like the way he delivers it, it's brilliant. I mean, I thought it was hilarious, and he's one of the people at the time. Like I think I'd put him in the class, like with Don Rickles, somebody that like no matter what they're saying, they just are naturally funny people. Mm-hmm. He's just one of those guys that like whatever he's doing, he comes off as funny. I think to sports fans and non-sport fans, really. Yeah. I know, like when we were growing up, I think my father wasn't really into to baseball at the time, but he knew who Bob Uecker was, and he found it hilarious. Yeah. And he would, I think, probably maybe watch a little bit of Mr. Belvedere just because Bob Uecker was on it, even though it was not at all the kind of show that he or other members in the family would really care about. Just because Bob Uecker was funny, and the way he said things was always hilarious. Yeah.
Why do you think he even managed to last as long as he did in the major leagues?
Well, I was going to try to give like a Bob Uecker line there, but they do point out that how instrumental he was in helping his teammates. He was beloved by his teammates because if anybody needed to take a day off, and he knew the good places to go and get like ptomaine.
That's right.
So you could sit out a day and get sick without and still get a paycheck. Teams would keep him around for that reason. But
a very good deadpan Joe Torre. Yeah. Which maybe is the only kind of Joe Torre, but
Torre was great in this. Yes.
It talks about his leadership skills and being able to lead his teammates to the best bars.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, Torre was good, and Hank Aaron, those we alluded to, he would just kind of like say these things and just kind of start laughing afterwards, and they'd leave it in there, which is kind of funny.
Right. Like he would try to do the joke, and he's like, "No, I never took advice from him."
Right. And I don't know if what the deal is with that, but at the same time, it's kind of cool that he was the home run king. Yeah. And some people say he still is, but I mean, this is one of the greatest baseball players of all time, sitting down and doing this for Uke and for it's pretty cool that he's on there.
I like the idea that they were pals.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he was a terrible hitter, but he was competent as a catcher. And back then, catchers weren't expected to do a lot except catch the ball, and he was a backup and wasn't really needed much. So kind of a journeyman. And
they did show a montage of him throwing back to the pitcher, but the ball ending up in the outfield.
Yeah, his throws were so strong that they went all the way into the outfield because his arm was so powerful or something. Yeah,
and being a slow runner.
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't really any outstanding skill that he had.
No, but he does have a World Series ring, which I believe he was wearing.
Yeah, many people do not have that. But yeah, I found this episode just absolutely hilarious, and when we were looking at episodes to see, I thought, well, this one isn't represented, but I kind of wanted you to watch it because I thought you'd enjoy it. And I think it's a good example of, like you said, like the mockumentary before it was really a cliche, just kind of a good example of really how to do it. And they put some care into this, and it was a really welcome break from the show's usual format, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think it's good, and I think it's good. It was good for me to see both, and then because it does at the same time as breaking format, it sticks to the format. I mean, that's part of what makes it work.
Right.
You can kind of get a sense of the show through it.
Yeah.
So if you only watch one, just watch this one.
Yeah, I think you could probably do that. Especially if you're not like really into sports and you don't necessarily need to see Marvin Hagler and training or something like that.
Yeah.
You can see this and be entertained for like 20-some minutes and find a pretty funny thing that I think would be accessible to even people that don't like sports.
Now, don't be confused on Amazon when you see an episode about Bob Uecker.
Oh, that's horrible. Yes,
Yeah.
They didn't spell it.
It's easy to do, but that is Bob Uecker.
Yeah.
Maybe that was part of the joke.
Yeah, it could be. Somebody at Amazon Prime put their own little spin on it. And
Yeah.
And Bob Uecker did have a couple of like other syndicated shows. I think like a lighter side of sports kind of thing, like Bob Uecker's Wacky World of. He'd do some specials and things that would, I think, probably in syndication and
sports bloopers and things.
Yeah. He would definitely, and he'd pop up, I think, on as a guest besides the Tonight Show. So yeah, he kind of dipped his toe into the separate sports programming, but I guess probably his most enduring TV work, except for. And he's mostly a radio guy now with the Brewers, but would be Mr. Belvedere. And he was also like a national baseball broadcaster for a while, a little bit outside our time frame, but he was part of like a really good booth, I think, with Bob Costas when NBC was doing some baseball for a while. So
that sounds like a good match.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually like the funny thing is he's like a play-by-play guy with the Brewers, and he's very respected as a broadcaster. I mean, he's not like Harry Doyle that you see in the for Cleveland in the Major League movies, but like on these national broadcasts, he was able to do more color and kind of like add things in his personality. And he really knows baseball, and he's actually like a legitimately good broadcaster. And he's funny, and I think he played up more like in the national role, but he's not like a clown or anything like that. He's a very good announcer and is beloved in Milwaukee. And he's in his mid-80s now. He's had some, he doesn't go on as many road trips maybe, and had some heart issues like about 5 years ago, but seems to be in reasonably good shape. And even with a reduced schedule, he's still at it.
Still want to see that Mr. Belvedere revival.
Well, if
maybe Byron Allen can take care of that.
Yeah,
so,
you know, checks off all the boxes today.
Maybe it'd just be a movie for Entertainment Studios.
Try it out as a movie, see how it goes, and then maybe develop it into something and put it in syndication. Maybe Byron Allen has tried to bring back first run syndication.
Yeah.
And maybe this is kind of what he needs. These ideas, he could put like a little programming block.
Right. Yeah. Don't squirrel these away for reboot.tv.
Yeah.
Whatever channel you got.
Yeah, internet TV or some kind of like.
Yeah.
Channel 1422 on DirecTV.
Right. Squirrel them away for 2:30 in the morning on a Saturday.
Yes.
When everyone knows a Byron Allen show should be on.
Now, here's the question. Do you think that today a dad sitting in his den would watch Byron Allen on a Saturday afternoon, like maybe on his way out to, or after a round of golf at the club?
Maybe if he'd had enough drinks.
Yeah, it might need a little fortification there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It is the problem of too many choices now.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people still just watch something because it's on.
Right.
Maybe sometimes.
Yeah, especially in just the whole thing of infomercials now have crowded out a lot of this kind of programming, unfortunately.
Yeah, but who's watching?
Yeah, I don't...
Why would you watch an infomercial?
I don't know.
I realize not everyone has access to all of those things, but a lot of people do.
Right.
Why would you watch an infomercial instead of,
Or just... turn on your phone if it comes down to it. If you don't have a big cable package, or if you don't, just if you're only getting TV off an antenna, if you might have a smartphone, you could at least find something to entertain yourself with there.
I could see someone watching Byron Allen while doing something on their phone.
Yeah, like multitasking a little bit.
Yeah, maybe they left the TV on, and then you don't have time to change the channel because you're busy.
Right.
Like reading a Reddit article or something.
Yeah, that sounds like an opportunity.
That's right. I said a Reddit article. I don't know anything about Reddit.
Yes. That's good. A Reddit
it's
conversation.
It's a news source,
thing,
right?
Yes. I think this sounds like a golden opportunity for Byron Allen to develop an app so that he captures people while they're watching TV and using the smartphone.
Oh.
So that maybe there should be a Byron Allen app.
It should be, yeah.
Like with clips, from his shows, his own stand-up and things like that, and like tidbits, entertainment news, lifestyle features, all in one place.
Yeah.
Maybe some extra benefits for those that are willing to pay a premium, maybe.
Yeah. If Byron weren't around to host, Ahmad Rashad.
Oh, there you go. Yep. Ahmad Rashad could easily do this. And
I bet he was a guest on Greatest Sports Legends.
He might have been.
I mean, he was a sports legend at some point.
He was a very good player.
Yeah.
He's a very good player. And he was a very good golfing buddy of Michael Jordan, too. So there's that. Maybe if they do Greatest Sports, gambling cronies and golfing partners, Ahmad Rashad will be one of the first episodes.
Yeah. Pat O'Brien could also.
Pat O'Brien interviewing Ahmad Rashad would be the dream, I think. A comprehensive look
at NFL sideline reporting. Yeah. Or NBA sideline reporting.
Yes. Well, across all.
That's right.
That's right. Ahmad did
NFL.
NBA. He did both. Yeah. He did. Yeah. See, that's real versatility.
Yeah.
To stand like in a pea coat or on a suit on the sideline in an NBA game or outside.
Yeah. That's right. I associate. See, I got so confused. I associate him so much with NBA.
Yeah.
But he was a football player.
Right. That's career reinvention for you.
I can understand two sports.
Yeah. That's why, it makes you respect some of these greatest sports legends. Like, Reggie Jackson didn't just interview baseball players. He'd go and interview boxers and golfers.
I got to watch one of those because I can imagine him being good at that.
Yeah. Reggie Jackson, of all the ones I've seen, I think on there is probably like the best as far as the ex-jocks that did it.
I wonder if they had to get rid of him at some point.
He
got too full of himself.
You got to imagine it didn't end well.
He was, he just...
Yeah.
He's the straw that stirs the drink.
Right. His dream, he kept pitching them every year on him interviewing himself.
Uh-huh.
This is what the people want, and they would never approve that, so he finally just walked away.
Yeah.
Like, fine. If you're not going to have the...
He also paid out of his own pocket to film a documentary of how they made Reggie candy bars.
Yes.
With the hope that they would buy that.
Right.
And then they didn't.
It's a special episode.
And then, years later, when TLC started showing all those factory things... He was like, I had that idea.
Yeah. What could have been?
He could have done, the candy bars, his bats, whatever else. I'm sure he had a glove, too.
Yeah, probably. All that would have worked. I agree.
Yeah.
But we just got to see him, interviewing a few of his contemporaries.
When he said, George Plumpton.
Yeah, George Plumpton, I think, was like the real early years. And yes, participatory, greatest sports legending, I guess, whatever he was doing.
Well, he did have that background of... What was it? He tried out for the Lions?
Yeah, he was like a paper line. He was working in training camp with the Detroit Lions, and wasn't he?
There's at least one other athlete.
He did a baseball. He did a couple of them. I think some of them are lesser known. Like I think he did a bowling one. Maybe it's like, well, how difficult is that? Well, maybe for George Plimpton it was difficult to be in a bowling alley.
Maybe
for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah. And of course, his in television.
I was going to say, is this going to be an excuse for me to cram an television commercial into the playlist?
It sounds like it is.
I think we will. I'll make it that.
I wonder if he was ever on Mr. Belvedere.
I don't know. Can you imagine him and Bob Uecker going back and forth with the repartee?
Maybe he auditioned for the role of Mr. Belvedere.
Mr. Belvedere?
Yes.
I don't know. I wonder if Bob Uecker had casting approval over Mr. Belvedere. Maybe he was. Maybe he influenced it one way or the other.
I don't know. Sure. I guess if we do that, we're gonna have to look into the history of that show because I am curious about. I mean, he wasn't really, other than the commercials, he wasn't an actor.
No.
Per se, before that, as far as I know.
Yeah, he was a personality.
Yeah. So did they build the show around him, or did they decide to get him?
Yeah.
Did they build the show around Christopher Hewitt after his brief appearance on Fantasy Island?
Well, it didn't work out so well replacing Tattoo, but...
But there's something about this guy.
Yeah, there's something here. There's star power. His Q rating is through the roof.
Were they looking for a vehicle for Bryce?
Yeah. Well, you can never have too many teen idols.
Right. Especially in 1985.
Yeah, the ABC was in the teen idol game, so, Bryce Beckham had a pay-or-play deal with ABC that... forced them to do something, and then they eventually had to build a sitcom around him.
That's great. He was a teen idol before he was a teen.
Yeah. He was a teen mogul before he was a teen idol. And a teen. Yeah.
So, Greatest Sports Legends.
Yeah, Greatest Sports Legends. Like we said, great show, interesting time capsule, and recommend you check some of it out.
Yeah. We'll get to some of this other stuff.
Yeah. We got some homework for the future.
Yeah, we got to go call Byron Allen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it all starts. Well, Reggie Jackson is the straw that stirs the drink. It starts with Reggie Jackson, then Byron Allen, and then Bryce Beckham. And that's the story of entertainment in three people. This episode brought to you by the La Costa Spa and Resort in Carlsbad, California, unofficial spa and resort of Battle of the Network shows. This episode also brought to you by Athletic Support. This episode also brought to you by Bob Uecker's signature Must Be in the Front Row binoculars, the official binoculars of Battle of the Network shows. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.